I'm your host, Doreen Steenland, and today I'd like to welcome our guest, Stephanie Chivers. Why don't we just start by telling our community um, a little bit about yourself and why you are so passionate about doing what you do?
So I'm a coach and a therapist, and like you say, a lot of what I do is about teaching, guiding, supporting, coaching people to change their relationship with alcohol. And I've got 17 years personal and professional experience. So the personal bit is I have successfully changed my relationship with alcohol. The professional bit is I've done every job there is to do within behavior change and now run a community interest company. And a big reason about why I do that is because in the UK, and also I know in the US, years and years and years ago, there weren't a range of options. So it would be either you went to your doctor, or you went to a treatment center, or you went to a 12-step meeting. Whereas a lot of people like me, professional people, probably didn't want to do that. And they wanted to be able to access something confidential, accessible, but also affordable because, there's private options out there that cost a fortune. So that's really what prompted me setting up, which started as a business, but we've changed to a community interest company. And the big thing for me is that people get the chance to live healthy, happy lives. And the bottom line is whether you think your drinking is a problem or not, the less you drink, the happier and healthier you're going to be. And when you're happier and healthier, everything else is so much easier.
Wow, 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 wow. I want to point out a few things that you said. Um, your personal journey has been a huge part of this, first and
Mhm,
foremost. And I could
mhm.
attest for myself, I also have had a personal journey with challenging my relationship with alcohol. And so people can't imagine living without alcohol. And I know that I was one of those people. It was a part of my life. It was a part of uh, everyday dinner conversations, a glass of wine with dinner or a glass of wine after work. And it was part of my socialization. So I couldn't imagine my life without it. But what I noticed personally was that the influence of alcohol in my life was um, becoming too prominent. And,
Yeah.
and so my first clue for that for me, and maybe you can speak into this a little bit, was when I started declining social invitations that had nothing to do with alcohol. I'm like, wait a
Yeah.
second, there's a problem here. If I can't have social interactions with other
Yes.
human beings, if there's no alcohol, that's a clue that there's something not right about this relationship that I'm creating with alcohol. So,
Yeah.
talk about how that speaks to you personally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a unique relationship with alcohol, very much in the Western world. It's people always think there's something wrong with them, and I always say to people, okay, stop. You're not broken. You're a human being because it is unique. There is no other drug that has been like this, and alcohol is a drug, so I call it a drug, and that helps people to, frame it that way. So I think really since the 1950s, alcohol has been aggressively marketed to us in lots and lots of different ways. So here's the thing, alcohol is really cheap. So people can make a lot of money out of alcohol and it's legal. So it's a legal drug that sits, I mean, in the UK, it's everywhere. I know in the US, it's slightly different depending on where you live, but it's really easy to get hold of. It's really cheap. It's highly addictive, hugely habit forming, aggressively marketed to us. And there's no warnings on the bottle. There's nothing about units or percentages on there, but that would go over people's heads quite a bit. There's nothing that says, like when you get opiate painkillers, it says, be careful, this is an addictive substance, and that's prescribed to you. Whereas with alcohol, it doesn't say anything like that. And with tobacco, we've got all those horrible pictures about what tobacco does. But alcohol looks good. It's legal, it's socially acceptable, it's ingrained in our society, pretty much for sort of generation sort of up to 60, 70. Anybody that's lived sort of for the last 60, 70 years, it's a massive part of their life. And humans love to seek out pleasure and alleviate pain. So if you've got a substance that's pretty much in front of your face, It's really easy. It's super easy. Massive part of our culture, teenage life, rites of passage, university, all that type of stuff, weddings, everything. So the first thing is if you are drinking regularly, if you're noticing that you are making the decisions like you said, like you don't want to go on dates if you can't have a drink, you don't want to go to work functions or that type of thing. You need to have a drink, wherever you are. First thing is not to give yourself a hard time and just be honest with yourself about your drinking. That's the first thing. And the second bit really is to educate yourself about what alcohol is so that you can make an informed choice.
Oh, so good, so good. So I want to just highlight a few things that you said, and I want to relate it back to my own life for a moment.
Yeah.
Um, for me, alcohol was glamorized. And I think that's what you were
Yeah.
saying about the cultural influence. It was glamorized and it was connected in my brain with fun,
Yes.
that alcohol equals fun, right?
Yeah.
And that's a lie. Because let's think about this. As children who were not drinking alcohol, we knew how to have fun, right? We were quite capable of having fun without alcohol. So what flip switch flips for us as adults that make us think that we need alcohol to have fun? That's what
Well,
I
that's,
started questioning, right? I started questioning,
yeah.
all right, this relationship with alcohol, that I
Mm,
need this to have fun. I need this to have
mm,
intimate relationships. I need this to relax. We're all like a big smoke screen that I had been ingesting for a lot of years,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's the power of advertising right there, though, isn't it?
Yes.
Like, to be sold that, I mean, if you look into that, if anybody does a bit of research on it, it's fascinating about how we have been sold this idea about alcohol. Now, I'm not saying it isn't that either, because here's the thing, alcohol, you can have a drink. Alcohol is a social lubricant as a drug. That's what alcohol is good for. It's also poison, a toxin. So the idea is it's not supposed to be ingested in significant quantities. That's the problem with it. So if you're having a drink, with a friend or with a meal, it's a social lubricant. You get the dopamine hits, and it does way more than that in the brain, but I won't go into that. I'm not a neuroscientist, so I won't go into that. But you get that lovely sort of like feel good, and that's where you're getting your treat and reward and that type of stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. It's when we ingest too much of it, and we're using it for lots of different reasons.
Yeah. So I love what you're saying, that for me, as I was thinking about when it finally dawned on me that this relationship with alcohol was potentially problematic, but I didn't
Mhm.
quite fit into the AA category, right?
Yeah.
I didn't see myself as not highly functioning because I am highly functioning. I didn't see myself as addicted because I don't think I was addicted, but I noticed that it was having more of a pull on me than I
Yeah.
wanted. I noticed that there were times that I overindulged and beat myself up for it the next morning. I noticed that I would, it was uh, pulling away, taking away my confidence,
Yeah.
because I'd say and do things that really weren't in line with who I wanted to be as a person.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
AA did not fit for me. So this whole concept of sober curious, the sober curious movement was fascinating for me, because a large part of what helped me to to make the leap and actually start thinking through these things was having relationships with other people in communities that were challenging the same thoughts. And now those people, they're not all not sober and not drinking. Some of them are moderating. So let's move towards that for a moment, because we're not saying right here that you have to give up drinking forever. So don't tune off.
No, no,
Don't
we're
turn
definitely not saying
off.
that.
We're saying
Yes.
that there is possibility to reduce and moderate. So
Yeah.
tell us about this. Is this possible, and how do we like how does this work?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely for a large section of the population, moderation, reducing occasional drinking, appropriate use of the drug is entirely possible. It's only a very small number of people that need to be abstinent. And even then, depending on what their risk factors are. So, somebody could be abstinent for years and years and years and then have an occasional drink. Yeah, as long as they haven't got liver disease or something like that. I mean, it really does depend on your risk factors. So the fact of the matter is the majority of people can reduce their drinking, they can moderate, they can learn to have an occasional drink. And actually a lot of people do that anyway. And what we tend to see is a fluctuation of drinking patterns. So somebody might experiment with alcohol as a teenager and might drink too much, might overindulge because they're a teenager, or they're experimenting, but then they don't drink very much. And then maybe they drink a bit more at university, but then they don't drink very much again. And, they only have a social drink occasionally. And then maybe some life events happen and they start drinking a bit more, or they're stressed, or they're anxious, or maybe it's just habit. These are the types of things that we see. So people go in and out of different patterns, and lifestyle can really be a factor. So a lot of the work that I do with people is not just about education and reducing the practical side of it, which is entirely possible, learning about alcohol, learning about the percentages of alcohol, making better choices, choosing alcohol-free drinks, choosing to change how you socialize and mixing all of that up. It's also about what's going on in your life that's causing you to drink. Are you tired? Is there something difficult going on? Are you stressed? Are you anxious? There doesn't always have to be something. Retirement sometimes, it's those life changes. So there's many, many different factors involved. But yeah, like anything, you've built up this habit for whatever reason, probably unconsciously without even being aware of it. I don't think people consciously drink more. So if you've learned how to do that, you can actually unlearn it. Humans are learning machines.
Oh, yes. I love what you're saying, because from a neuroscience standpoint, right, it
Yes.
is a pattern, it's a
Yes.
habit, it's
Yeah.
something that can be intercepted, interrupted, and
Yes.
stopped. And I
Yeah.
love what you're saying. So I want to build on something else that you just said in that last soundbite, was that people do these things for various reasons. And I'm thinking back in my own journey, and I'm thinking back at the times that I was most ashamed. And that's what it really is, right? When we overindulge and we're not being ourselves, and we
Mhm.
wake up in the morning and we're beating ourselves up, and we're ashamed of
Mhm.
whatever we did, whether we did or said anything wrong or not. We just know that we weren't authentic with ourselves and who we wanted to be. So that shame always came and was connected with my inability to manage my own emotions. So what I grew up in a house where emotions were not really talked about, right? And I think that many of us grew up in society, in cultures, uh, we were raised in a time when emotions were like taboo. We didn't talk about them.
Yeah.
We we
Yes.
stuffed them and we just moved on. Suck it up,
Yeah.
buttercup. Those are the
Yeah.
things that we're told as kids. Suck it up, stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry. All of those things that our parents honestly said to us because they knew no better, right?
Yeah.
And so I personally didn't know how to deal with those emotions. So
Mhm.
alcohol was what I learned would
Mhm.
help silence those emotions a little bit.
Yeah.
So what can you say about that aspect of it, and how that impacts the work that you do with your clients?
Yeah, that can be a really big one because to start off with, you've got the habit component. So when somebody comes to me, it's because, there's something that's not working for them in their life, whether they recognize it's the alcohol or not, it doesn't really matter. But people are usually drinking a little bit too much. And I always say, look, we need to reduce your drinking so we can work on whatever it is that's going on. Now, they may or may not be aware of what's going on emotionally. In fact, it's really common that it isn't until they start reducing and building up alcohol-free days that then they start to realize that certain things are difficult, or actually, oh, this is what the problem is. One of my friends used to call it, taking drugs. So, and that includes alcohol, is like having your answer machine on. And when you stop doing that, you have to listen to the messages. Now, that isn't always the case. It isn't always the case. Sometimes it is just habit, and it's the education and learning new things, and then you just feel great and off you go. But for some people, there can be a couple of things that can happen. So you reduce and you start to feel. And actually, it's those feelings that are that it's a bit too much, and that's when you feel cravings, or it triggers you to want to drink. But the key bit there is to remember that a lot of that is about habit. It's
Yes.
about habit, about a time of day, or just an emotional response. Sometimes tiredness can be a trigger, end of the day routine. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be anything big, or it can be as simple as, if you've used alcohol or even drank a little bit since a teenager, chances are you've used alcohol in response to an emotion, whether you've got a problem or not,
Yeah.
because that's what society teaches us. So if you have that habit, you go to work, you have a difficult day, you come home, maybe you haven't had a drink for weeks and you feel great, but the habit is that, oh, I normally use alcohol to relax or to numb or to deal with these emotions. So learning how to recognize how we feel and then do different things with those emotions. So in the early days, we always talk about distraction. We talk about doing something different, because for some people, the first 3 months it can be a little bit too difficult. So a lot of therapists will talk about, well, you need to learn how to be with your feelings and sit with them. Well, that's great if you can do that. But for some people, their feelings are really intense to start off with because they're just not used to it. So
Mm.
then it's like, okay, what can you do differently? So, for instance, if you use alcohol as a treat and reward, it's recognizing that in your brain. Oh, I feel like I need a treat. I deserve a reward. Great. How else can you treat and reward yourself? Or, oh God, I need to relax. I need to shut my brain off. Okay. How else can you relax? How else can you shut your brain off? Or I feel stressed. Okay. What can you do with the stress? How do you change that emotion? Yeah. So there's
Yeah.
so much to it in terms
This
of the
is
learning.
so huge what you're talking about. You're talking about this whole habit loop that is happening in our brain, and these pathways that we're taking automatically and we don't even know it. And part
Yeah.
of intercepting those patterns is becoming aware of them, becoming aware that they exist so we know exactly where to intercept them and change them, and what we can add in its place or remove, or, as you're saying, build upon new and better habits. And what I would say is build new pathways in your brain, right? Because that's
Yeah.
what we're really doing. We're
Yeah.
building new neural pathways so that we can make better choices. So
Yeah.
how do you know if drinking is a problem for you?
Okay. So there's a number of things, not one on its own. So
Okay.
I would say if you are drinking daily,
Mhm.
I would be wanting you to have some alcohol-free days. Now, even if you were just having a glass of wine a day, all right, that's not a big deal. It's not massive. But I would still like you to have a couple of alcohol-free days, because essentially it's a drug and we don't want anybody using a drug daily. That's it's not what we want to see. So if you're using it daily, I want you to have some alcohol-free days. And if you recognize that you're using it regularly in significant amounts. So when we're getting into sort of people who are drinking a bottle of wine and they're drinking a bottle of wine 2 to 3 times a week, maybe more, then it doesn't really matter if you think it's causing you a problem, the amount is causing you a problem. It's a health harm. So I would want people to be educating themselves. But the other part, there's other parts to it as well. One of them is impact. So being honest with yourself about what the impact is of your drinking. So whether that's about it's impacting on your sleep, it's impacting on your skin, on your stomach, it's impacting on your self-esteem. So a really common one is, well, common ones are anxiety and depression, because it can increase, cause, and exacerbate anxiety and depression. And like you're talking about habit loops, anxiety can be a real loop for alcohol. You know, people feel anxious and stressed, so they drink. They think it works in the short term, it sort of does, but then actually as part of the withdrawal, that's increasing your anxiety and stress. So it's a bit short-term gain, long-term pain. It's not really working. So there's stuff around the impact of your drinking, but there's also being honest with yourself about how you're using it. Like you said, recognizing that, oh, hang on a minute, I only want to go somewhere if there's alcohol, or if you're thinking about it all the time, or if every time you're stressed you have a drink, if it's your go-to, if it's your coping mechanism. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I love everything you're saying. So, we're talking about shining a light on what's really happening inside for us, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about examining the motives behind it, um, seeing if this is just some kind of habitual pattern for us that is no longer serving us. It might have served us for a while. So, for me, I noticed that. When I started discovering about the habit loop and how all of this worked, I noticed like, okay, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Like I'd say that in my brain, right? Okay, the time is there. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. I'm feeling a little anxious. And so I'd get the glass out and I'd pick up the bottle of wine. And even before I put the wine in my mouth, as I was pouring the wine, I'd feel like, ah,
Yeah. Yeah.
notice that about yourself, right? Because
Mhm.
that tells you that it's not the wine that is causing your relaxation. It's a
Mhm.
completion of the habit loop that's sending
Mhm.
off those that dopamine hit, right? So we can change that and get that relief in other ways. And I love
Yeah.
that that is what you specialize in doing.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a classic example of habit, exactly what you're talking about there, that you're actually getting the chemical release before you've even had the drink, because that's the anticipation part. And it's also a brilliant example of how powerful our brains are, you know, so that's a huge part of what we do in terms of teaching people. So once people have reduced and they're building up alcohol-free days, it's about human behavior. It's not, you know, people talk about the addict brain. No, it's about the human brain and human behavior, like you're talking about um you know, plasticity in the brain and learning things and neurological pathways and stuff like that. It's just about understanding that we're thinking, feeling beings, and how we use the power of the brain to support us.
Yes, so good. And for me, it wasn't really even about the alcohol. For me, the benefit was wanting to grow and have more
Yeah.
self agency. I wanted to have
Yeah.
more control over what was happening on the inside of me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so taking this step for myself to be alcohol free for a period of time has been a huge growth opportunity to manage my own internal landscape well. Right now,
Yeah.
now I have tools that I'm able to do that. So for those who have not seen the benefits yet, what are some of the benefits to reducing alcohol?
So it really doesn't matter how much you're drinking. You know, even if people are drinking a couple of glasses of wine a day, I would still recommend that you reduce, build up some alcohol-free days, and maybe just take a break for a little while as well and just see what happens, because it's amazing the difference, you know, people report to me. So the things that I see are clarity, which is exactly what you're talking about, like knowing yourself and understanding your mind. So better sleep, your skin improves. Like when people reduce their drinking, people can see it in their face. It's amazing. Like people are like, "Oh my God, what are you doing? You look fantastic." So skin, stomach improves, confidence improves. So usually no hangovers, less anxiety, if like no anxiety at all, and just a massive improvement around physical and emotional well-being. So confidence. I think one of the loveliest things that I see, which is, when people sort of reduce and take a break or build up alcohol-free days, whatever they do, is like 6 months, 3 to 6 months, they really start thinking about, oh, how do I want my life to be? And sometimes they start making changes around their work and their job and where they live, and just really get to live their life and fulfill their potential, which is really exciting.
It is exciting. Wow.